Jan Crawford is outside the Supreme Court with more. Jan, so tell us more about the March for Life. Who's expected to speak before the rally begins?
Well, I mean, this is obviously an annual event. Ever since the Supreme Court ruled in 1973 that the Constitution protects a woman's right to an abortion, you have seen tens and tens of thousands of protesters from across the country arriving here around the anniversary of that decision. And I mean, these are deeply committed protesters. They come in buses, there's school groups, Catholic school groups. It tended originally to be more Catholic, but now we see a lot of evangelicals who by percentages overwhelmingly oppose sweeping rights to abortion. And today I think is going to be a little different than some of the marches that we've seen in years past. I mean, number one, obviously the vice president will be speaking. He is the highest ranking official to ever speak at this event. But also I think you're going to see from the protesters a lot of hope. After President Trump's election, they really believe that he will nominate a justice to the Supreme Court who will, like the justice he'll replace, Justice Scalia, vote to overturn Roe versus Wade. But I have to say, I mean, not to throw cold water on that, but they've got a long way to go to ever overturn Roe versus Wade. Right now, there's only one justice on the Supreme Court that we know for sure would overturn Roe, and that's Justice Thomas. The other Republican-appointed justices, we don't know. And of course, in the past, you've seen Republican presidents nominate justices, and they've gone on to refuse to overturn it because the law has been on the books for so long. So regardless of your personal views, the question is, are you going to overturn a case that's been on the books that long?
Jan, speaking of that, President Trump is expected to announce his Supreme Court nominee next week. We know William Pryor's stock seems to be down for fear of a repeat of a 2003 hearing when he was nominated to the 11th Circuit. Neil Gorsuch and Thomas Hardiman are less controversial. What cases are either of them best known for?
Well, I mean, they, unlike, William Pryor, have not really had kind of any public statements about abortion. All three of them say they will faithfully apply the law regardless of their personal views. But Gorsuch and Hardiman have not, as lawyers, I mean, Pryor was a politician, have not as lawyers spoken out against abortion. So that's really giving them the edge. But, these are both considered solid conservatives. Aside from that, however, I think they're very different candidates. Gorsuch is a real blue blood elitist establishment figure. He went to prep school here in D.C. He went to Columbia, Harvard, Oxford. He was, basically it's kind of like what a stereotypical Supreme Court justice would be, an Ivy Leaguer who with a pretty elite background. Hardiman, on the other hand, is a lot more like William Pryor. He is outside the Beltway, did not go to an Ivy League school, of course, graduated with honors from Notre Dame for undergrad, Georgetown for law school, drove a taxi to put himself through law school. So he really has those kind of blue-collar, Western Pennsylvania, Mass. He's from Mass, his wife's from Western Pennsylvania, roots, a lot of the people who voted for the president. And I think you're seeing a real momentum for someone who is not in that kind of elitist mold that the seven or eight other justices now have. And I've seen in the past, like Justice Thomas, for example, say that we really need to have this kind of academic diversity. The court is so in this same mold that is kind of forgotten about everyday people in some cases. So, I mean, it's an interesting choice, I think, now in front of President Trump. Does he go with the kind of traditional establishment pick, or does he pick someone who's a little outside the mold, highly qualified but different?
All right, Jan Crawford for us outside the Supreme Court. Thank you.
Thanks.